the more that we grow in popularity, the more our enemies become nasty as well. I'm afraid it's part of the game.
Yes. Here in Europe, we've seen major acts of terrorism in cities like London and Madrid. We've seen debates about Sharia law in Britain. We've seen debates about burqas in especially France, riots in the suburbs of France, cartoon riots in Denmark, and so forth. But in a sense, it seems as if the Netherlands has somehow become the center for this controversy, for this conflict. I mean, we've seen the murder of Pim Fortuyn. We've seen the murder of Theo van Gogh. We've seen the hounding and harassment and tormenting of Ayaan Hirsi Ali. And now you. What is it about the Netherlands that is there something special about this country that has made it the epicenter of this?
Well, in Holland, in the past, we were applauded, at least the government was applauded by the Germans, by the Belgians, by many, because we have such a consensus-like society, which, according to some, had a lot of advantages. But one of the big disadvantages was that if you want to make a law in Holland, it will take you years, not only because of the lawmaking process, because it's our history and attitude that you have to agree with everybody. We are a multi-party system. Besides parliament and government, everybody has to take a piece of the cake and has to agree on it. And don't forget that the leftist party, who were ruling, and even today for almost all the time since the Second World War, those parties invented the multicultural society in Holland. They were the founding fathers of all these problems we have today, and they are very not eager to admit their mistake. And they are also politically more depending every moment on the immigrant vote in the Netherlands. So the combination of that made very certain that the cultural relativism, the idea that cultures are equal, which I believe is a very big misconception, became very dominant, and it's very difficult to change anything. And I hoped that after those terrible things you mentioned, also the murders in the Netherlands and how Ayaan Hirsi Ali was treated, that something would change. But it did amongst the people, but it did not in the political elite. So there are also many other countries, like look at the United Kingdom, look at Germany, look at France, look at Denmark, where they have problems and they don't have all the solutions either. But we are almost paralyzed by acting because the ruling parties invented this whole scheme of multiculturalism. Invited all those people in the last decade to emigrate to the Netherlands, are depending politically on all the elections on the vote of those people, and this paralyzes us. And I believe that the majority of the public is being fed up with that, and this is one of the reasons that my party is so popular today. And this makes the Netherlands special. We are, and I believe in a bad way, grown on consensus, and we are tolerant to everybody, even to the intolerant, and I believe we should never stop being tolerant to the tolerant, but we should start getting tolerant to the intolerant, also in our country. And unfortunately, we are not, at least the Dutch government is not.
Well, apropos of that, I was very, very struck yesterday by an opinion piece that I read, and I think it was in the Volkskrant, by I think it was some professor, whose very argument was that Geert Wilders is trying to talk about the truth of Islam, but the whole Dutch social contract, as it were, is based on the idea for centuries that we are not supposed to look at the truth about each other's religions. And it was a remarkable argument. It was an absolutely breathtaking argument to read in a paper in the 21st century in the Western world. And I did feel that it was something distinctly Dutch. It was a distinctly Dutch argument. And so I understand what you're talking about there. What would you say to people in other countries, in other European countries, in America, in Canada, other democracies around the world, if they said to you that this trial here in the Netherlands doesn't concern them?
Well, it does concern them. What I always say is, I mean, I'm now, if you look at the TV and everything, I'm the victim, but it's not about me. This trial is really not about me. This trial is about freedom of speech, and is about whether we accept an ideology full of hatred that goes against everything that we stand for. If we want to have a rule of law and a civil society and freedom for all of us. And now in the Netherlands today, a parliamentarian, it's me, but it could be anybody else in any other country in the future, is being charged by speaking the truth and by using his freedom of speech and warning and fighting for the freedom of my country and of our freedom. And if I would be convicted in the Netherlands, then I strongly believe that the freedom that we so pamper in our society will be turned back for at least a century, if not 2 centuries. And if that happens to me, it can happen to anybody else, because the multiculturalists, the cultural relativists, but also the people, the Islamic ideology will have gained enormous ground. If they could silence somebody, in my case a democratically elected politician, by not being able to criticize an ideology. I mean, I wish we had some kind of American First Amendment, but I believe it's also starting in the United States. And what I would say to people in Europe, but also in the United States and Canada, is that don't think it won't happen to you. Don't think that freedom will be eternal for you. I quoted in the first public court session Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd President of the United States, who once said that the price of freedom is an eternal vigilance. And this is what we also always should remember, that if we don't stand up and fight for our freedom, and once again, it's not only our right, but our duty to fight for freedom, and if we don't see Islam for what it really is and what it really intends to establish, which is a non-free society dominated by Islam, then our countries will change, and we will lose everything that we have ever fought for, that our fathers and grandfathers fought for. So for Europe it's very important, but also I believe for the United States it's important not to lose the European ally, and not to see, as some people have stated, that Europe will change in the future in some kind of non-free, like Bawer, my dear friend Bawer said, some kind of Eurasia with totally different values. And what can happen in Europe can also happen to the United States, even though in the United States people have the First Amendment. Everything can be changed. And so my fight is not my personal fight, but is a fight that I believe goes for every free man and woman in the world who wants their own values to be there, amongst which freedom and freedom of speech and freedom of expression and equality for also the next centuries to come.
Thank you very much, Geert Wilders, for giving me your time and for your eloquence and your courage.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.